Have you ever emptied your pocket or a jar of spare change and wondered if one small penny could be hiding a bigger story? What if a simple Lincoln penny from 1978, one that looks completely ordinary, is actually more interesting than most people realize? The coin we're talking about today is the 1978 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks just like countless other pennies most Americans have handled, spent, or ignored for decades. But behind this everyday appearance is a story tied to American history, changing metal prices, collector passion, and the surprising details that can turn a common coin into something special. The 1978 Lincoln penny without a mint mark was made in Philadelphia. That's why there's no letter under the date. For decades, Philadelphia-produced coins often carried no mint mark at all. In 1978, millions of these pennies were struck as part of America's ongoing need for small change during a time of economic uncertainty and rising inflation. To understand why this coin exists, you have to look at the late 1970s. The United States was dealing with high inflation, fuel shortages, and rising metal costs. Copper prices were climbing, and the government was under pressure to keep producing affordable coins while managing expenses. Even so, in 1978, pennies were still made primarily of copper, something that would change just a few years later. The Lincoln cent design had already been around for almost 70 years by that point. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. By 1978, Lincoln's familiar profile was deeply embedded in American culture, and the penny had become a symbol of everyday life. On the front of the 1978 penny, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his head is the word liberty, and in front of his face is the date, 1978. Just below the date, you'll notice there is no mint mark. That absence tells you it was struck in Philadelphia. The phrase "In God We Trust" arches along the top. Turn the coin over, and you'll find the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. This design was introduced in 1959 and remained until 2008. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. In terms of metal, the 1978 Lincoln penny is made of about 95% copper and 5% zinc. It weighs approximately 3.11 grams. This is important because pennies made after 1982 switched to a mostly zinc composition. Many collectors and casual coin holders prefer pre-1982 pennies because of their higher copper content. So if millions were made, why do people still care about the 1978 no-mint mark penny? The answer lies in condition, errors, and collector demand. While most 1978 pennies are only worth face value, some examples stand out dramatically. One factor is condition. A penny that has never been circulated, meaning it was never used in everyday transactions, can be far more valuable than one that's been worn down by decades of handling. These high-quality coins are graded on a scale, and those with sharp details, full luster, and no damage are highly sought after. Another factor is mint errors. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process. In 1978, there were occasional mistakes that created unusual coins. Some pennies show off-center strikes, where the design is not properly centered. Others have double details, especially in the date or lettering, known as double die errors. There are also pennies from 1978 that were struck on the wrong planchet, which is the blank metal disc used to make coins. These are extremely rare and valuable. A penny struck on a planchet meant for another coin can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on condition and authenticity. Auction records give us a clearer picture of value. A typical circulated 1978 no-mint mark penny might be worth just 1 cent. But a high-grade, uncirculated example can sell for several dollars. In top condition, professionally graded coins have sold for significantly more. Error coins from 1978 have sold for hundreds and, in rare cases, thousands of dollars at major auctions. Collectors often look for pennies graded MS-65 or higher. These coins show almost no flaws and still have strong original shine. When demand is high and supply is low, prices can rise quickly, even for a date that was once considered common. If you're wondering how to identify a real 1978 no-mint mark penny, start with the basics. Check the date carefully and confirm there is no letter under it. Look at the weight if you have a small scale. It should be close to 3.11 grams. A significantly different weight could indicate damage or an unusual error. Next, examine the details. Authentic coins have sharp, well-defined lettering and consistent spacing. Be cautious of altered coins, where someone may have removed a mint mark from another penny to make it look like a no-mint mark version. Under magnification, these alterations often leave scratches or unnatural surfaces. Professional grading services exist for a reason. If you believe you found an unusually valuable example, having it authenticated by experts can protect you from mistakes and help establish its true market value. There are also some fun and surprising facts about the 1978 penny. For example, many of these coins are still in circulation today. That means the penny you receive in change could be over 45 years old. Few people realize just how long coins can stay in use. Another interesting detail is that 1978 was only a few years away from a major change in penny composition. By 1982, rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to switch to a cheaper metal blend. This makes 1978 part of the final generation of mostly copper pennies, which adds to its appeal. Collectors love this coin not because it's flashy or rare by default, but because it represents a moment in American economic history. It's a reminder of a time when even the smallest coin reflected larger national challenges and decisions. For many collectors, the joy comes from the hunt. Finding a high-grade 1978 penny in a roll, a jar, or inherited change can feel like uncovering a small piece of the past. Even error coins often surface in unexpected places, long after they were minted. The 1978 no-mint mark Lincoln penny also appeals to beginners. It's affordable, easy to recognize, and offers a gateway into understanding how condition, errors, and history influence value. It teaches that not every valuable coin looks rare at first glance. As you look at your own change, remember that coins like this were designed to be used, not collected. That's what makes surviving pristine examples so fascinating. Each one avoided countless transactions and somehow remained nearly perfect. So the next time you see a 1978 penny without a mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check its condition. Look for unusual details. You might be holding a simple piece of copper, or you might be holding a coin with a story that collectors are still eager to hear. Sometimes, the most interesting treasures aren't hidden in vaults or museums. They're quietly waiting in plain sight, right in the palm of your hand. Imagine pulling a single penny from your pocket and realizing it connects directly to the end of one American era and the beginning of another. A coin so ordinary it's usually ignored, yet it carries a quiet story that most people never hear. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1979 D-Mint mark Lincoln penny, and why this small copper coin still matters. The coin we're talking about is the 1979 Lincoln 1-cent piece with a D-Mint mark. At first glance, it looks just like countless other pennies you've seen your whole life. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. But this penny comes from a very specific moment in U.S. history, a time of change, economic pressure, and the final years of an important chapter in American coinage. In 1979, the United States was facing rising inflation, high metal costs, and a rapidly changing economy. Gas prices were climbing, everyday goods were getting more expensive, and even the humble penny was becoming costly to produce. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to keep coins affordable while maintaining tradition. The Denver Mint, marked with a small D beneath the date, played a major role in supplying pennies for everyday use across the country. This penny was not made to be rare. It was made to circulate, to pass from hand to hand, buying newspapers, candy, and cups of coffee. Millions upon millions were struck in Denver in 1979. That's part of what makes this coin so interesting. It represents the last stretch of an era when pennies were still mostly copper, before major changes would arrive just a few years later. The metal composition of the 1979 D. Lincoln penny is especially important. It is made of about 95% copper, with a small amount of zinc. This gives the coin its familiar warm, reddish-brown color when new. Only 3 years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint would dramatically change the penny's composition to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That makes the 1979 penny one of the last classic copper cents Americans would ever see in daily use. The design itself tells a story. Abraham Lincoln has been on the penny since 1909, chosen to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. By 1979, Americans had been seeing Lincoln's face on their coins for 70 years. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, introduced in 1959, symbolizes unity, remembrance, and national heritage. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, a detail many people miss entirely. So if millions were made, why do people still talk about the 1979 D penny today? The answer lies in condition, errors, and history. Most examples are worth just 1 cent. But collectors don't look at coins the way everyday spenders do. They look for perfection, mistakes, and stories frozen in metal. One of the biggest factors that can add value is condition. A 1979 D penny that has been heavily circulated, scratched, or darkened is common. But a coin that looks almost brand new, with sharp details and original shine, is far harder to find today. These are the coins collectors call uncirculated, and they often survived only because someone set them aside decades ago. Then there are minting errors. Errors are accidents that happened during the striking process, and they turn ordinary coins into fascinating collectibles. Some 1979 D pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted and part of the coin is blank. Others may show doubled letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear slightly repeated. There are also examples with cracks in the metal or weak strikes where details didn't fully form. These errors are not common, and that's where the real interest begins. A clear, dramatic error can turn a 1-cent coin into something worth tens, sometimes even hundreds of dollars, depending on how noticeable and well-preserved it is. Collectors love errors because each one is unique. No two error coins are exactly alike. There have been documented sales that show this difference clearly. A regular circulated 1979 D penny might sell for just a few cents above face value. But an uncirculated example graded by a professional service has sold for several dollars. Error coins have sold for much more. Off-center strikes and strong doubling have attracted serious collector attention at coin shows and online auctions. It's important to stay realistic. Claims you might see online about this penny being worth thousands or millions are usually exaggerated or misleading. Genuine high prices are tied to very specific conditions and verified errors. Still, even modest values can surprise people who never imagined a penny could be collectible at all. If you're wondering how to identify a real 1979 D penny, it's actually quite simple. First, check the date. It should clearly read 1979. Then look just below the date on the front of the coin. You should see a small D mint mark. This indicates it was struck in Denver. If there is no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia, and that's a different coin. Next, examine the color and weight. A genuine 1979 penny should have the look and feel of a copper coin. While professional scales are best, copper pennies feel slightly heavier than modern zinc cents. Be cautious of altered coins, where dates are changed or mint marks are added. These fakes usually show tool marks or unnatural surfaces under magnification. Using a simple magnifying glass can reveal a lot. Look closely at the lettering, Lincoln's profile, and the memorial. Genuine coins have consistent textures and smooth, natural wear. Anything that looks uneven, scratched, or oddly shiny could be a sign of tampering. There are also some fun and surprising facts about this coin. In 1979, the penny had already lost much of its purchasing power. Decades earlier, a single cent could buy candy or even a newspaper. By 1979, it was already becoming symbolic rather than practical. Yet Americans continued to use and save pennies, showing how deeply rooted this coin was in everyday life. Another interesting detail is that many people today are unknowingly holding copper pennies that are technically worth more than face value just for their metal content, though melting them is illegal. This adds another layer of fascination for collectors who appreciate the historical and material value of these coins. Collectors love the 1979 D Lincoln penny because it represents a bridge between generations. It's old enough to feel historical, yet modern enough to be familiar. It connects childhood memories, family collections, and the final years of copper cents. For beginner collectors, it's an affordable entry point. For experienced collectors, it's a condition and error challenge. This penny also reminds us that not every valuable coin announces itself loudly. Some whisper their importance through context, timing, and subtle details. The 1979 D penny doesn't rely on rarity alone. It relies on story, preservation, and the simple fact that it survived unchanged while the world around it moved on. As you look at your own change, remember this. Every coin has a story. Some are just harder to hear. The next time you spot a 1979 penny with a small d beneath the date, pause for a moment. You're holding a piece of American history from the closing days of the copper penny era. And who knows, that quiet little coin might not make you rich, but it might spark a curiosity that leads you deeper into the fascinating world of U.S. coin collecting. Because sometimes, the most interesting treasures are the ones we've been overlooking all along. Imagine reaching into a jar of old change and pulling out a penny that looks completely ordinary. No special shine. No unusual color. No mint mark at all. But what if that simple penny quietly connects you to a turning point in American history? A year when the U.S. penny was about to change forever. Today, we're uncovering the real story behind the 1980 no mint mark Lincoln penny and why collectors still pay close attention to this overlooked coin. The coin we're talking about is the 1980 Lincoln 1-cent piece made at the Philadelphia Mint. When a Lincoln penny has no mint mark under the date, it means it was struck in Philadelphia. For many people, this detail is easy to miss, yet it is one of the most important clues in identifying where a coin was made. At first glance, the 1980 no mint mark penny looks like any other Lincoln cent from the late 20th century. Abraham Lincoln faces right on the front, just as he has since 1909. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that defined American pennies for nearly 50 years. This coin may look common, but its timing in history makes it more interesting than most people realize. The year 1980 sits right on the edge of a major change in U.S. coinage. Throughout the 1970s, the rising price of copper caused serious concern at the U.S. Mint. Pennies were still made mostly of copper, and it was becoming expensive to keep producing them that way. By 1982, the mint would switch to a copper-plated zinc composition. That means the 1980 penny represents the final years of the traditional copper Lincoln cent. Every 1980 no mint mark penny is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. It weighs about 3.11 grams, heavier than modern pennies. For collectors, this weight alone helps place the coin in a specific era. It also gives the coin a solid feel that many people notice immediately when they hold it. The design itself carries quiet details many people never notice. On the front, Lincoln's portrait was created by Victor David Brenner, and if you look closely at the shoulder, you can find his initials, VDB. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial actually shows a tiny statue of Lincoln between the columns, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides at once. One unique aspect of the 1980 penny is that it comes in two date styles: large date and small date. The difference is subtle, but important to collectors. On the small date variety, the numbers in the date appear thinner and more delicate, especially the number 8 and the 0. On the large date, the numbers are thicker and slightly taller. To the average person, they look the same, but side by side, the difference becomes clear. Neither variety is extremely rare, but condition matters more than people expect. Most 1980 no mint mark pennies were heavily circulated. They were used daily, tossed into jars, and spent without a second thought. Finding one today in pristine condition is far less common than finding a worn example, so why do people even talk about the value of this penny? The answer lies in grade, errors, and historical timing. In circulated condition, a 1980 no mint mark penny is usually worth only face value, or slightly more because of its copper content. But in uncirculated condition, especially with full original red color, values begin to rise. Coins graded mint state by professional grading services can sell for surprising amounts. A 1980 Philadelphia penny graded MS66 red may sell for around $20 to $40. Higher grades bring much stronger prices. Examples graded MS67 red have sold at auction for over $150, sometimes more, depending on eye appeal and demand at the time of sale. Error coins are another reason collectors stay alert. Some 1980 pennies were struck off-center, showing part of the design missing. Others show die cracks, doubled letters, or weak strikes. While most errors are minor, dramatic errors can increase a coin's value significantly. A clearly off-center 1980 penny with strong details can sell for hundreds of dollars to the right buyer. Because these coins are common, fakes are rare, but altered coins do exist. Some people try to modify dates or damage coins to make them look like errors. To identify a genuine 1980 no-mint mark penny, start with the basics. The coin should weigh close to 3.11 grams. A magnet should not attract it, since copper is not magnetic. The color should be a natural brown, red-brown, or red, not overly bright or artificial. Look closely at the date and lettering. Real mint errors usually look natural and flow with the metal. Artificial damage often looks sharp, uneven, or forced. When in doubt, experienced collectors recommend professional grading, especially if you believe you have a high-grade or error example. There are also some fun and surprising details tied to this coin. In 1980, the United States was facing inflation, rising metal prices, and economic uncertainty. The penny you're holding today was minted during a time when many people questioned whether the 1-cent coin would even survive. Yet here it is, still in circulation decades later. Another interesting fact is that millions of 1980 pennies were saved by people who believed copper prices would soar. As a result, large quantities still exist in rolls and collections, untouched since the year they were made. Occasionally, collectors open old rolls and discover beautifully preserved coins that haven't seen the light of day in over 40 years. Collectors today appreciate the 1980 no-mint mark penny not because it is rare, but because it represents the end of an era. It is one of the last copper pennies most Americans ever used in daily life. It connects modern collectors to a time before the composition changed, before designs shifted, and before coins became something many people stopped paying attention to. For new collectors, this penny is also an affordable entry point. You don't need thousands of dollars to start. You can learn grading, study varieties, and understand errors using coins like this one. For experienced collectors, finding a high-grade example is a satisfying challenge as you go through your change or old collections. Remember that value isn't always about rarity alone. It's about condition, history, and timing. A simple 1980 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may not make headlines, but it quietly tells the story of American money at a crossroads. So the next time you see a penny with no mint mark and the date 1980, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Weigh it. Study the date style. Examine the color and details. That ordinary-looking coin might not be priceless, but it holds a piece of American history in your hand. And sometimes the most interesting stories are not told by the rarest coins, but by the ones that were almost forgotten. Most people would never give this penny a second look. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and yet, in the right condition or with the right hidden detail, a 1981 Lincoln penny with no mint mark can surprise even experienced collectors. This coin is the 1981 Lincoln 1-cent piece with no mint mark, meaning it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, it looks just like countless other pennies Americans handled every day in the early 1980s. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait is on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing rare-looking, but coins like this often hide their value in plain sight. To understand this penny, we need to step back to the year 1981. America was going through a period of economic change. Inflation in the 1970s had affected everything, including the cost of making coins. Copper prices were rising, and the U.S. Mint was already planning major changes to how pennies would be made. Just 1 year later, in 1982, the Mint would switch from mostly copper pennies to copper-plated zinc. That makes 1981 important. It was one of the final years when pennies were still made of solid copper alloy. The 1981 no-mint mark penny is composed of about 95% copper, with the remaining metal being zinc and tin. This gives the coin a heavier feel and a warmer color compared to modern pennies. The design itself is part of a long-running tradition. Abraham Lincoln's portrait, first introduced in 1909, was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial design had been used since 1959, symbolizing both Lincoln's legacy and American unity. By 1981, this design had been in circulation for over 2 decades, making it deeply familiar to the public. So if millions of these pennies were made, why do collectors care? The answer lies in condition, rarity within common coins, and subtle mistakes that slipped past quality control. While the 1981 no-mint mark penny is not rare in general circulation, high-quality examples are surprisingly hard to find today. Most were heavily used, scratched, or discolored over decades of handling. Collectors look for coins in near-perfect condition, with sharp details, clean surfaces, and original luster. A 1981 penny that looks almost new is far less common than people expect. Coins graded at the highest levels by professional grading services can sell for far more than face value. Then there are errors. This is where curiosity really begins. Some 1981 no-mint mark pennies were struck with small but noticeable mistakes. These include off-center strikes, where the design is not perfectly centered on the coin. There are also double die errors, where parts of the lettering or date appear slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. These errors are subtle, but once you see one, it stands out. Another collectible feature is weak or missing details caused by worn dies. Some 1981 pennies show unusually light lettering or incomplete design elements. While these may look like damage at first, certain examples are recognized mint errors and can add value. Value is where expectations need to stay realistic. A typical circulated 1981 no-mint mark penny is usually worth only 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples can be worth just a few cents to a few dollars. However, coins in exceptional condition, especially those graded at the top levels, have sold for significantly higher prices in private sales and auctions. Pristine examples with professional certification have sold for tens, sometimes even hundreds of dollars. Error coins can go higher depending on the type and visibility of the mistake. These are not life-changing sums, but they are real, documented sales that show how an ordinary penny can become a collector's item. Identifying a genuine 1981 no-mint mark penny is simple, but details matter. First, check the date. It must clearly read 1981. Next, look just below the date on the front of the coin. If there is no letter, no D, and no S, then it was made in Philadelphia. That is what no-mint mark means. Next, weigh the coin if possible. A genuine 1981 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. This helps confirm it is not a later zinc penny or a damaged piece that lost metal over time. The color should be a natural copper tone, not gray or silvery. Be cautious of coins that look altered. Some people try to modify coins to imitate errors. Real mint errors usually have smooth, natural-looking surfaces and consistent wear. If something looks scratched, filed, or intentionally damaged, it likely has no collector value. One fun detail about 1981 pennies is that many Americans unknowingly saved them. As rumors about copper pennies spread in the early 1980s, people started pulling older cents from circulation, thinking they might become valuable someday. As a result, many 1981 pennies ended up in jars, drawers, and collections, untouched for decades. Collectors today appreciate the 1981 no-mint mark penny because it represents the end of an era. It is part of the last generation of traditional copper cents. It connects modern collectors to a time when pennies were made differently, felt heavier, and lasted longer. There is also nostalgia involved. For many people, 1981 was a memorable year. These pennies passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and school lunch lines. Holding one can bring back memories in a way few modern coins can. Another surprising fact is that even though millions were made, finding one in truly flawless condition is difficult. Copper is soft. It scratches easily. Most coins were stacked, rolled, and transported without much care. That makes top-grade examples stand out. Collectors love the challenge of finding that one perfect coin. The 1981 no-mint mark penny offers an affordable entry point into coin collecting while still rewarding patience and attention to detail. As interest in U.S. coins continues to grow, ordinary dates like 1981 are being re-examined. People are learning that value is not only about age or rarity, but also about condition, history, and uniqueness. So the next time you come across a handful of old pennies, take a closer look. That brown, ordinary-looking cent might be a 1981 no-mint mark Lincoln penny. It might not make you rich, but it could connect you to a fascinating moment in American minting history. Sometimes the most interesting stories are hiding in the smallest places. And sometimes, all it takes is one quiet penny to remind us that even everyday objects can carry unexpected value. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could quietly tell one of the most dramatic stories in American coin history. A penny from a single year that changed how U.S. coins were made forever. Today, we're talking about the 1982 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny, a small copper-colored coin that represents a turning point most people never noticed at first glance. The 1982 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny looks just like countless other cents. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits calmly on the back. There's no mint mark under the date, which means it was made in Philadelphia. Millions of Americans have owned this coin without giving it a second thought. But behind the simple design is a year of confusion, experimentation, and hidden surprises that still fascinate collectors today. To understand why the 1982 penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1980s. The United States was dealing with rising inflation, and the price of copper was climbing fast. For decades, pennies had been made mostly of copper, but by 1982, the metal inside a 1-cent coin was worth nearly as much as the coin itself. This created a serious problem. It was becoming too expensive for the government to keep making pennies the old way. So in 1982, the U.S. Mint made a historic decision. They changed the composition of the penny. Instead of being mostly copper, new pennies would be made primarily of zinc, with just a thin copper coating on the outside. This change saved money, but it didn't happen overnight. During that single year, both copper pennies and zinc pennies were produced at the same time. This is what makes 1982 such a fascinating year for collectors. The no-mint mark 1982 Lincoln penny comes from the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally does not place a mint mark on its coins. In that year, Philadelphia struck pennies using both metal types and more than one style of date. As a result, 1982 produced more different penny varieties than almost any other year in modern U.S. history. There are two main things that make 1982 pennies unique. The first is the metal. Some 1982 pennies are about 95% copper, while others are mostly zinc. The second is the date style. Early in the year, the numbers in the date were slightly larger and thicker. Later in the year, the mint switched to a smaller, slimmer date design. When you combine metal type and date style, you end up with several distinct varieties, all from the same year. To the average person, these differences are nearly invisible. But to collectors, they make all the difference in the world. A copper penny feels heavier in your hand, weighing about 3.1 grams. A zinc penny is lighter, weighing around 2.5 grams. That tiny difference can tell you which version you're holding, even if it looks the same on the surface. The design itself is classic and familiar. Abraham Lincoln's portrait, first introduced in 1909, honors the 100th anniversary of his birth. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial had been used since 1959. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln, making this one of the few U.S. coins to show the same person on both sides. So why do people talk about the value of the 1982 no-mint mark penny? The truth is that most of them are still worth just 1 cent. Millions were made, and many are still in circulation today. But within this ordinary group are a few varieties that collectors actively search for, especially those connected to the copper-to-zinc transition point. One of the most interesting aspects of 1982 pennies is how unorganized the changeover was. The mint did not announce the exact day when copper pennies stopped and zinc pennies began. This means copper and zinc coins were mixed together in circulation, and even today, people continue to discover copper examples where they least expect them. Some collectors are especially interested in high-quality copper examples from Philadelphia. A well-preserved 1982 no-mint mark copper penny, particularly with a sharp strike and minimal wear, can sell for more than face value. While it won't make you rich, it can still be worth several dollars, and sometimes more if graded by a professional service. There have also been confirmed cases of rare combinations that were never supposed to exist. Certain date and metal pairings are extremely scarce, and when they appear at auctions, collectors pay close attention. In top condition, select 1982 penny varieties have sold for hundreds of dollars. These prices are not common, but they show how much interest this year still generates at coin shows and online auctions. 1982 pennies continue to attract attention. Collectors carefully weigh them, examine the date style, and look for sharp details. A professionally graded example in mint condition can fetch strong prices, especially if it represents a harder-to-find variety from that year. Identifying a real 1982 no-mint mark penny is simple, but identifying the exact variety takes patience. First, check under the date. If there's no letter, it was made in Philadelphia. Next, weigh the coin using a precise scale. This will tell you whether it's copper or zinc. Finally, compare the date numbers to reference images to see if it's a large date or small date style. These steps help separate a common penny from one collectors might want. When it comes to fakes, the good news is that counterfeit 1982 pennies are extremely rare. Because the base value of most examples is low, there's little incentive to fake them. However, altered coins do exist. Sometimes people plate zinc pennies to make them look like copper, or they alter dates to create the appearance of a rarer variety. Careful weighing and close inspection usually reveal these tricks. There are also some fun facts tied to this coin. The 1982 penny marks the end of an era. It was the last year when U.S. pennies were commonly made of mostly copper. After that, copper pennies essentially disappeared from everyday use. In a way, the 1982 penny bridges the past and the present, connecting the heavy copper cents of earlier decades with the lighter zinc coins we use today. Another interesting detail is sound. If you drop a copper penny and a zinc penny on a hard surface, they make different sounds. The copper one has a slightly higher, clearer ring, while the zinc one sounds duller. It's a simple test that many collectors enjoy trying for fun. Collectors love the 1982 no-mint mark Lincoln penny not because it's flashy or rare on its own, but because it tells a story. It represents a moment when economic pressure forced change, and that change happened in a messy, human way. Instead of a clean break, the mint produced multiple versions, leaving behind a puzzle that collectors are still solving decades later. For beginners, this coin is an easy entry point into the hobby. You don't need expensive equipment or deep technical knowledge. Just a scale, a careful eye, and curiosity. Many collectors remember their first experience weighing a 1982 penny and realizing they were holding a small piece of history. Today, the 1982 no-mint mark penny remains one of the most searched for dates by casual collectors. It encourages people to look more closely at their change, to slow down, and to ask questions. And that curiosity is at the heart of coin collecting, so the next time you see a 1982 penny without a mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Hold it, weigh it, and think about what it represents. A year of transition, a shift in American coinage, and a reminder that even the smallest coins can carry big stories. Because sometimes, the most interesting treasures aren't rare because they're scarce. They're rare because of the moment in history they capture. And the 1982 no-mint mark Lincoln penny captures a moment that will never happen again. Imagine finding a penny in your pocket that looks completely ordinary, yet could be worth far more than 1 cent. A penny so common that millions of Americans have handled it, spent it, and forgotten it. And yet, hidden among those everyday coins, a small number tell a very different story. Today, we're uncovering the truth behind the 1984 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that proves sometimes the most ordinary objects can hold unexpected value. The coin we're talking about today is the 1984 Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark. If you look at the front of the coin and don't see a letter under the date, that means it was made at the Philadelphia Mint. For decades, Philadelphia pennies were struck without a mint mark, so no mint mark is not a mistake. It's simply how these coins were produced. But what makes the 1984 penny special isn't just where it was made. It's what happened during the year it was struck. By 1984, the Lincoln penny had already been in circulation for more than 75 years. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By the 1980s, the design was deeply familiar to Americans. On the front, you see Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 and still used in 1984. The year 1984 sits in an interesting place in U.S. history. The country was in the middle of economic change, new technology was emerging, and everyday life was shifting. The U.S. Mint was also adjusting to changes in metal prices. Just 2 years earlier, in 1982, the penny's composition changed to save money. Rising copper costs made the old solid copper cent too expensive to produce. So the 1984 penny is not solid copper like older Lincoln cents. Instead, it is made with a zinc core and a thin copper coating. Specifically, it contains 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper on the surface. This change made pennies lighter and cheaper to produce, but it also introduced new problems that would later affect collectability in terms of design. The 1984 penny looks nearly identical to other Lincoln memorial cents. On the front, Lincoln faces right with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date to the right. Below the date, if there's no letter, you know it came from Philadelphia. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with United States of America across the top and 1 cent at the bottom. At first glance, there is nothing rare about this coin. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of 1984 pennies. They were made to circulate, to be used in everyday transactions, and most of them still exist today in jars, drawers, and old piggy banks. So why are collectors still talking about this penny? The answer lies in errors. In coin collecting, mistakes can sometimes be more valuable than perfection. And the 1984 no-mint mark penny is famous for one particular error that has captured collector attention for decades. The most important variety is the 1984 double die obverse. A double die happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during the manufacturing process. When that flawed die strikes coins, the design appears doubled, not because of damage, but because the die itself carries the doubling dot. On some 1984 pennies, this doubling is very clear, especially on the date and the word "Liberty." The numbers in 1984 may look thicker, with a noticeable shadow or separation. The letters in "Liberty" can appear doubled as well. This is not the same as simple wear or machine doubling. True double die coins show strong, rounded doubling that looks like two overlapping impressions. This error was not caught immediately. As a result, many double die 1984 pennies entered circulation. Over time, collectors discovered them and word spread. Today, the 1984 double die penny is one of the most well-known modern Lincoln cent errors. Most regular 1984 no-mint mark pennies are worth only face value in circulated condition. Even in uncirculated condition, they usually sell for a modest amount. But the double die variety is a different story. Depending on condition, these coins can sell for hundreds of dollars, and high-grade examples have sold for much more at auction. Collectors have seen certified examples sell for several $100s in lower mint state grades. Well-preserved coins with strong doubling and minimal marks have reached into the thousands. The exact value depends on condition, eye appeal, and certification by a trusted grading service. Because of this potential value, many people have gone back to their old penny collections to look for a 1984 with no mint mark. But it's important to know how to identify a real one and avoid disappointment. First, check the weight. A genuine 1984 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier, it may be from an earlier copper composition or altered in some way. Second, use a magnet. Real US pennies from this era are not magnetic. If it sticks to a magnet, it's not authentic. When it comes to the double die, use a magnifying glass. Look closely at the date and the word "Liberty." True double die coins show clear separation, not flat or smeared lines. Machine doubling, which is very common, looks flat and shelf-like and does not add value. Another thing to watch for with 1984 pennies is zinc corrosion, often called zinc rot. Because these coins have a zinc core, damage to the copper coating can expose the zinc underneath. Over time, moisture can cause bubbling or crumbling. While this is interesting, it usually lowers value rather than increases it. There are also counterfeit error coins on the market. Some altered coins are made to look doubled using tools or chemicals. This is why serious collectors prefer coins that have been authenticated and graded by professional services. Certification adds confidence and protects buyers and sellers alike. Despite being a modern coin, the 1984 no-mint mark penny has plenty of fun and surprising details. For one, it proves that even after billions of pennies had already been made, new varieties could still slip through unnoticed. It also reminds us that value in coin collecting is not always about age. Sometimes it's about what went wrong at just the right moment. Collectors love this coin today because it's accessible. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars to start searching. You can still find 1984 pennies in circulation, in old jars, or in inherited collections. That sense of possibility keeps people looking. This penny also represents a turning point in U.S. coinage. The shift to zinc marked the end of the traditional copper cent, a change that many collectors still talk about. Holding a 1984 penny is like holding a small piece of that transition. For new collectors, the 1984 no-mint mark penny is a perfect learning coin. It teaches the importance of mint marks, errors, condition, and careful inspection. For experienced collectors, the double die variety remains a prize worth hunting, so the next time you see a simple brown penny with the date 1984 and no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the details. Because sometimes, the coin you've overlooked 100 times may be the one with a story worth telling. And that's what makes coin collecting so fascinating. History, chance, and everyday life all come together in the smallest places. Even in a single penny, quietly waiting to be noticed. Most people have held this coin without ever giving it a second thought. It looks ordinary, almost boring. But hidden inside the 1985 D Lincoln penny is a quiet story about America, modern change, and why some everyday coins suddenly become important to collectors decades later. This coin is the 1985 Lincoln 1-cent piece with a D mint mark, struck at the Denver Mint. At first glance, it looks like millions of other pennies. Abraham Lincoln faces right on the front. The Lincoln Memorial appears on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. And yet, this penny marks an important chapter in U.S. coin history, right in the middle of a major transition that changed how American money is made. The Lincoln penny itself has a long history, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. By 1985, the design had already been in use for decades and was instantly recognizable to Americans. In the mid-1980s, pennies were still widely used in everyday life. You received them in change at grocery stores, gas stations, and diners. No one imagined that people would later examine these coins under magnification, searching for small details that could turn pocket change into collector pieces. The year 1985 was a period of stability for the United States Mint. Inflation had slowed compared to the 1970s, and the economy was finding its footing again. Pennies were being produced in massive numbers to keep up with demand. The Denver Mint alone struck well over 5 billion Lincoln cents in 1985. That huge number is one reason many people assume this coin has no value beyond 1 cent. But large mintages don't tell the whole story. By 1985, the penny was no longer made mostly of copper. Rising copper prices had forced the U.S. Mint to change the penny's composition just a few years earlier. Instead of solid copper, the 1985 D penny is made from a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper. It still looks like a traditional copper coin, but inside, it represents a cost-saving measure that continues today. This change makes 1985 pennies lighter than older copper cents, and that difference matters to collectors. The design of the 1985 D penny follows the classic Lincoln Memorial style created by Frank Gasparo. Lincoln's portrait on the front is calm and dignified, based on a sculpture by Victor David Brenner. The words "In God We Trust" appear above Lincoln's head. Liberty is to the left, and the date, 1985, is to the right. Just below the date is the small letter D, showing it was struck in Denver. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with United States of America at the top and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. This level of detail is part of why collectors love examining these coins closely, even decades later. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made in the billions? The answer lies in condition, errors, and survival. Most 1985 D pennies were heavily used. They were dropped, scraped, and worn down in circulation. Finding one today in truly perfect condition is much harder than it sounds. Coins that never entered circulation, known as uncirculated coins, are the ones collectors seek. A 1985 D penny with bright, original red color and no visible where can be worth significantly more than face value. Coins graded by professional grading services in high mint state conditions, such as MS66 or MS67 red, have sold for strong prices at auction. In recent years, examples graded MS67 red have sold for over $100, and in some cases closer to $200, depending on eye appeal and demand at the time of sale. Then there are error coins, which add another layer of excitement. Some 1985 D pennies show double die errors, where parts of the design appear doubled due to a misalignment during the minting process. This doubling can sometimes be seen on the date, the word liberty, or in God we trust. These errors are subtle, but when confirmed, they can increase a coin's value from a few cents to tens or even hundreds of dollars. Other errors include off-center strikes, broad strikes where the coin spreads wider than normal, or coins struck on the wrong planchet. While rare, these mistakes do happen, and when they involve a common date like 1985, they become especially interesting because collectors don't expect them. It's important to understand that most 1985 D pennies are still worth 1 cent. The valuable ones are exceptions, not the rule. This is what makes searching through rolls or old jars of change so exciting. You're not guaranteed to find something special, but the possibility is always there. Identifying a real 1985 D penny is simple, but identifying a valuable one takes patience. First, check the date and mint mark. The D should be clear and match the style used by the Denver Mint that year. Next, look at the coin's condition. Sharp details, full lettering, and a smooth surface with minimal marks are signs of higher quality. Weight can also be a clue. A standard 1985 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams because of its zinc core. If it weighs significantly more, it could be damaged, altered, or possibly struck on the wrong planchet, which would require expert verification. Magnification helps when looking for errors. A simple coin loop can reveal doubling or unusual features that aren't visible to the naked eye. If you believe you've found something special, professional authentication is always recommended. There are also many myths surrounding valuable pennies, and the 1985 D is no exception. Claims of ordinary examples being worth thousands of dollars are common online, but they are almost always misleading. Real value comes from verified condition and confirmed mint errors, not from the date alone. One fun fact about the 1985 D penny is that it sits right in the middle of the Lincoln Memorial era. Just a few years later, in 2009, the reverse design would change to honor Lincoln's life, and eventually the shield design would replace the memorial altogether. That makes coins like the 1985 D part of a design run that is now complete and firmly in the past. Collectors also enjoy this coin because it represents everyday American life in the 1980s. These pennies passed through millions of hands during a time of big cultural changes. They were used during the rise of home computers, cable television, and major shifts in the U.S. economy. Holding one today is like holding a small, silent witness to that era. For new collectors, the 1985 D penny is often a starting point. It's affordable, easy to find, and teaches important lessons about grading, condition, and realistic value. For experienced collectors, it's a reminder that even common coins can surprise you under the right circumstances. As interest in coin collecting continues to grow, especially among people rediscovering old collections or inherited change jars. Coins like the 1985 D Lincoln penny are being looked at more closely than ever before. While most will remain simple pocket change, a small number will continue to stand out, prized for their condition, errors, or unique history. So the next time you see a 1985 D penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment to look at it. Check the details. Think about where it's been and how many stories it could tell. Sometimes, the most unassuming coins carry the most interesting journeys. And that's what keeps collectors searching, one penny at a time. Most people have held this coin in their hand and never gave it a second thought. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary. But what if I told you that a simple 1990 penny with no mint mark could still surprise you today? Not because it's famous, but because of what it quietly represents in American coin history. This is the 1990 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions of Americans used every day, dropped into jars, spent at grocery stores, or forgotten in drawers. At first glance, it doesn't scream rare or valuable. And yet, for collectors, this penny holds a story that makes it worth a second look. Let's start with what this coin actually is. The 1990 Lincoln penny with no mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. In U.S. coinage, a missing mint mark doesn't mean a mistake. It simply means the coin was made in Philadelphia, which traditionally did not use a mint mark on pennies at that time. This makes the coin completely normal for its year, and that normality is exactly what makes it so interesting today. The year 1990 sits at a quiet turning point in modern American history. The Cold War was ending. Technology was changing how people lived. And the U.S. Mint was producing billions of coins to support a massive cash-based economy. Pennies were still essential. Vending machines, payphones, and everyday purchases depended on them. The Lincoln cent was everywhere. The Lincoln penny design in 1990 had already been around for decades. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner and first appeared in 1909. By 1990, it had become one of the most recognized images in the world. On the back of the coin was the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The metal composition of the 1990 penny is an important detail. Unlike older copper pennies from before 1982, the 1990 cent is made mostly of zinc, with a very thin copper coating. It weighs about 2.5 grams and has a bright, shiny appearance when new. This change in metal was made to reduce costs, as copper had become too expensive to use in large quantities. From a design standpoint, the 1990 No Mint Mark penny looks simple, but small details matter. Lincoln's portrait faces right. The words "In God We Trust" appear along the top edge. Liberty sits to the left of Lincoln, and the date 1990 is to the right. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial is centered, with United States of America at the top and 1 cent at the bottom. So why do collectors care about a penny that was made in huge numbers? In 1990 alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced well over 6 billion Lincoln cents. That number alone tells you this coin is not rare in everyday condition. You can still find them in circulation today. You might even have one in your pocket right now. But value in coin collecting isn't always about age or mintage numbers. It's about condition, uniqueness, and story. And this is where the 1990 No Mint Mark penny starts to separate itself from being just spare change. First, condition matters more than anything else. Most 1990 pennies were heavily used. They were scratched, worn down, and exposed to moisture. Finding one today in perfect, uncirculated condition is much harder than you might think. Coins that were never spent and kept in rolls or collections can look almost brand new, even after more than 30 years. High-grade examples of the 1990 No Mint Mark penny, especially those professionally graded by major coin grading services, can sell for surprisingly strong prices. While most circulated examples are worth only face value, a flawless, mint-state coin can sell for several dollars, and in rare cases higher depending on demand and grade. Then there are errors, which are where collector interest really comes alive. Errors are mistakes made during the minting process, and even common coins can become valuable if the error is dramatic or rare. Some known errors found on 1990 pennies include off-center strikes, where the design is not properly aligned on the coin. There are also double strikes, where the coin was struck more than once, creating a blurred or doubled appearance. Other examples include clipped planchets, where part of the coin's edge is missing, and die cracks, which appear as raised lines caused by damaged minting dies. These error coins were not intentional, and that's what makes them exciting. Each one is unique. Depending on the type and severity of the error, a 1990 No Mint Mark penny with a genuine mint error can sell for anywhere from $20 to several $100s. There have been documented auction results where high-grade 1990 Lincoln cents sold for well above what most people would expect from a modern penny. Certified examples in top condition have sold in the range of $50 to over $100, especially when competition between collectors is strong. Error coins can push prices even higher. Of course, not every shiny penny is valuable, and knowing how to identify a real coin versus a damaged one is critical. A real 1990 No Mint Mark penny should have sharp, clean lettering. The date should be clear and evenly spaced. The surface should not look bubbly or peeling, which can happen when zinc pennies are damaged by corrosion. Fake errors are surprisingly common. Some people intentionally damage coins to make them look unusual. Grinding, bending, or heating a penny does not make it valuable. In fact, it usually makes it worthless to collectors. True mint errors have specific characteristics such as smooth, natural-looking metal flow and consistent patterns that match known error types. Using a simple scale can help. A normal 1990 penny should weigh around 2.5 grams. A significant difference in weight could indicate damage or a genuine error, but it always requires further examination. Magnification is also useful. A basic coin loop can reveal whether doubling is real or just machine damage. There are also fun details about the 1990 penny that many people don't realize. This coin was made during a time when the US Mint was under pressure to produce massive quantities quickly. Speed sometimes increases the chance of minor errors, which is one reason collectors still search through rolls of 1990 pennies today. Another interesting fact is that the 1990 Lincoln penny is part of the final full decade of the classic memorial reverse. In 2009, the design changed to commemorate Lincoln's life, and later, the shield reverse replaced the memorial entirely. That gives the 1990 penny a quiet historical placement in the timeline of US coin design. Collectors also love this coin because it's accessible. You don't need to be wealthy to collect Lincoln cents. Anyone can start by checking change, buying rolls, or searching old jars. The 1990 No Mint Mark penny reminds collectors that treasure hunting doesn't always require gold or silver. Sometimes it starts with copper-coated zinc and curiosity. Today, this coin represents something deeper than its face value. It's a snapshot of everyday American life in 1990. It passed through countless hands, witnessed millions of small transactions, and survived decades of circulation. Each one has a story, even if it never becomes valuable. And that's why collectors continue to search for it. Not because every 1990 penny is rare, but because somewhere out there, a perfectly preserved example or a genuine mint error is still waiting to be discovered. So the next time you see a 1990 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Turn it over. Check the details. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking coins are the ones that connect us most directly to history, and occasionally they still have something surprising to offer. Most people have held this coin in their hands and never gave it a second thought. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary, but hidden within this simple copper-colored penny is a story that still surprises collectors today. A story about small details, rare mistakes, and how a single letter can change everything. This is the story of the 1992 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. The 1992 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D beneath the date tells us exactly where it was made. In 1992, billions of pennies were struck, and most of them were meant for everyday use. They passed through hands, pockets, and cash registers across America. But not all 1992 D pennies are the same, and that is where the mystery begins. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the early 1990s. The United States was changing fast. Technology was growing, prices were rising, and the penny was still an essential part of daily transactions. In 1992, the Lincoln Memorial penny design was still in use, a design that had been around since 1959. It was familiar, trusted, and deeply connected to American history. The coin was made to honor Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. His portrait appears on the front of the coin, facing right, just as it had for decades. Above his head is the phrase, "In God we trust." To the left is the word liberty, and below is the date, 1992, with the D Mint mark just under it. This simple design had become one of the most recognizable coins in the world. On the back of the coin is the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of unity and remembrance. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside. Above the building are the words United States of America, and below it reads 1 cent. This design was used until 2008, making the 1992 penny part of the final years of the Lincoln Memorial era. The 1992 D penny was made primarily of zinc with a thin outer coating of copper. This change had been introduced years earlier to reduce costs, but many people still assume older pennies are solid copper. The coin weighs about 2.5 grams and measures just under 1 inch wide. On the surface, it looks like nothing special. But collectors know that the value of a coin often hides in the smallest details. So why would anyone care about a 1992 D penny today? After all, millions were made. In fact, the Denver Mint produced over 4 billion of them. That massive number means most examples are worth just 1 cent. But in the world of coin collecting, rarity is not always about how many coins were made. Sometimes it is about how many were made differently. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1992 penny involves something called the close AM variety. On the back of the coin, look at the word America. On most pennies from this period, there is a noticeable gap between the letters A and M. However, on a very small number of 1992 pennies, those letters are almost touching. This tiny difference is nearly invisible unless you know what to look for. The close AM design was supposed to be used on proof coins, not regular circulation pennies. Somehow, a small number of these reverse dies were used by mistake. This error created one of the most desirable Lincoln penny varieties of the modern era. While the 1992 close AM is most famous without a mint mark, meaning it was made in Philadelphia, a 1992 D close AM also exists and is even rarer. For collectors, the 1992 D close AM penny is the real prize. Only a handful have been confirmed. Most people will never see one in person. This single design detail can turn an ordinary penny into a coin worth thousands of dollars. Auction records tell the story clearly. Normal 1992 D pennies in circulated condition are worth 1 cent. Even uncirculated examples usually sell for just a few dollars. But verified 1992 D close AM pennies have sold for several $1,000s, depending on condition. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have reached prices that shock people who once ignored pennies altogether. Errors do not stop there. Some 1992 D pennies show off-center strikes, where the design is shifted to one side. Others have doubled letters, especially noticeable in the date or the word Liberty. These errors happen during the minting process and escape quality control by accident. While most are minor, some are dramatic enough to catch a collector's eye and increase the coin's value. Identifying a genuine 1992 D penny is simple, but identifying a valuable one requires patience and attention. Start by checking the date and mint mark. Make sure the D is clearly visible under the year. Then flip the coin over and look closely at the word America. Use a magnifying glass if you have one. If the A and M are very close together, you may have something special. Weight is another clue. A genuine 1992 penny should weigh around 2.5 grams. If it is significantly heavier or lighter, it could be damaged or altered. Be cautious of coins that look suspiciously modified. Some people attempt to alter common pennies to imitate rare varieties, but trained collectors can usually spot these fakes quickly. The best way to confirm authenticity is through professional grading. Services like PCGS or NGC examine the coin, verify its details, and seal it in a protective holder. This not only confirms the coin is real, but also gives it credibility in the collector market. There are also fun and surprising facts about the 1992 D penny. Many of these coins are still in circulation today, hiding in jars, drawers, and old piggy banks. Every year, collectors search through rolls of pennies hoping to find that one rare variety. It is a modern treasure hunt that anyone can join. Another interesting detail is that 1992 was one of the last years before subtle design changes began appearing in Lincoln cents. Just a few years later, the reverse design would change slightly, making the close AM variety even more meaningful as a transitional error. Collectors love this coin because it represents the thrill of discovery. It reminds people that valuable items do not always look valuable. Sometimes history hides in plain sight. The 1992 D penny also appeals to beginners because it is affordable to collect normal examples while still offering the dream of finding something extraordinary. This coin connects everyday Americans to the minting process, to history, and to the idea that even small objects can carry big stories. It turns spare change into a conversation piece and curiosity into a passion as you go through your coins. Remember that the next rare find may already be in your hands. The 1992 D Lincoln penny proves that even the most ordinary coin can have an extraordinary side. And the next time you see a penny dated 1992 with a small D beneath it, you might pause just a little longer, wondering what story it has left to tell. Imagine holding a tiny piece of history in the palm of your hand, a coin so ordinary that most people pass it by without a second thought. Yet, this small piece of copper and zinc could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars if you know what to look for. Today, we're diving deep into one of the more intriguing pieces of American coinage, the 1995 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. This is not just any penny. It's a coin that carries a story, a hidden value, and a charm that continues to capture the attention of collectors across the country. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some of these pennies are considered rare treasures and how to spot one if it crosses your path. The 1995 D. Lincoln penny is part of a long line of 1-cent coins featuring Abraham Lincoln, first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Designed by Victor David Brenner, the Lincoln penny has remained one of the most enduring symbols of American currency. The D Mint mark indicates that this particular penny was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the country's primary coin production facilities. While millions of Lincoln pennies were produced each year, the 1995 D penny has certain characteristics that make it stand out for collectors and enthusiasts alike. To understand why this coin is interesting, it helps to know a little about the history of the mid-1990s in coin production. By this time, the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies each year to meet growing demand. Most of these pennies were circulated heavily and quickly lost their mint luster. However, collectors and numismatists began paying close attention to subtle differences in minting, variations in design, and any errors that might appear. The 1995 D penny became notable not because of its sheer quantity, but because of certain unique features and the potential for rare varieties. The Lincoln penny of 1995 retained the familiar obverse design with Abraham Lincoln facing right, the inscriptions "In God We Trust" along the top edge, and "Liberty" to the left of Lincoln's profile. The year 1995 is stamped just to the right, and the D Mint mark is positioned just below it, signaling its Denver origin. On the reverse, the coin features the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been standard since 1959, marking Lincoln's 150th birthday. The detail on the memorial is intricate, including tiny columns and a clear depiction of Lincoln's statue inside the building. Most importantly for collectors, the 1995 D penny is made of a mostly copper composition, with 95% copper and 5% zinc. This composition was standard until 1982, and though it had shifted slightly to include more zinc in some coins, the 1995 D retained the classic appearance, giving it a rich, warm tone that appeals to enthusiasts. One of the reasons this penny has drawn attention among collectors is the potential for mint errors. Errors can occur in any production year, but the 1995 D penny occasionally appears with double dies, die cracks, or off-center strikes. A double die is a particularly fascinating phenomenon, where certain design elements, like the date or lettering, appear to be duplicated slightly. Even small variations can turn a common penny into a highly sought-after collectible. Other notable features include minor die clashes or missing elements, which are accidental mistakes during the minting process that create subtle but detectable differences on the coin's surface. While not every 1995 D penny has these errors, the very possibility adds an element of excitement for collectors searching through rolls of coins in hopes of finding something extraordinary. Now, you might wonder what really makes the 1995 D Lincoln penny valuable. Unlike some older pennies from the early 1900s that can fetch thousands simply due to age and rarity, the 1995 D penny's appeal lies in its combination of condition, minting quality, and occasional errors. A penny in pristine condition, especially one that has never circulated, is often called a mint state coin. These coins maintain their original luster and sharpness, making them far more attractive to collectors. Certain error varieties from this year, like the double die obverse, can push the value even higher. In fact, some examples in near-perfect condition have been known to sell for hundreds or even over $1,000 at auction, depending on the rarity of the error and the coin's overall quality. To give you a clearer idea, consider a few real-world examples. One 1995 D Lincoln penny with a slight double die error recently sold in a collector's auction for over $800. Another specimen in pristine mint state without any error was valued around $50 to $100, which is still significantly higher than the face value of 1 cent. These numbers illustrate an important point. Condition and uniqueness matter more than the year alone. Even a coin from the 1990s, which might seem ordinary at first glance, can hold real financial and historical value if it has the right characteristics. Identifying a genuine 1995 D Lincoln penny is simpler than you might think, but attention to detail is crucial. Start by looking at the mint mark and the date. The D should be clear and distinct, and the date should match the font and spacing typical for that year. Examine the edges and surfaces carefully. Any anomalies like doubling, die cracks, or unusual indentations may indicate an error coin. Avoid coins that appear artificially altered, such as those with re-engraved letters or numbers, which can be a sign of tampering. Consulting a trusted coin guide or working with a reputable numismatist is always wise, especially if you suspect your penny might be valuable. Even a simple magnifying glass can reveal the subtle details that separate a common penny from a rare collector's piece. There are some fun and surprising details about the 1995 D penny that make it even more fascinating. For example, while the Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse may look familiar, a closer inspection reveals tiny representations of the statue of Lincoln sitting inside, something many people miss on first glance. Another interesting fact is that 1995 was part of a period when the Denver Mint produced an exceptionally high number of coins, yet certain minting variations were still rare enough to attract collector interest. These small quirks, whether errors or slight differences in coloration and strike, create a hidden layer of excitement in what seems like an everyday coin. Collectors today love the 1995 D Lincoln penny not just for its potential financial value, but for the story it tells. Each penny is a snapshot of American life in the mid-1990s, reflecting both the enduring legacy of Abraham Lincoln and the meticulous craftsmanship of the U.S. Mint. Hunting for these pennies connects people to history in a very personal way, turning what might seem like a simple coin into a tangible link to the past. The thrill of discovering an unusual error, the satisfaction of holding a coin in perfect condition, and the joy of adding it to a curated collection are all part of the experience that keeps collectors coming back year after year. Even if you're not a dedicated coin collector, the 1995 D Lincoln penny offers a fascinating glimpse into the world of numismatics. It reminds us that value isn't always obvious at first glance, and that sometimes extraordinary treasures hide in the most ordinary places, like a pocket full of pennies. So next time you come across a 1995 D Lincoln penny, take a moment to examine it. Look at the date, check the mint mark, and notice the subtle details that set it apart. You might just be holding more than a coin. You could be holding a piece of history, a collector's item, or even a small fortune waiting to be recognized. And here's the curious part. Even though millions of these pennies were made, only a select few possess the qualities that make them truly remarkable. So the next time you dig through a jar of coins, remember, one 1995 D Lincoln penny could be hiding a secret that makes it far more valuable than its 1-cent face value. History, rarity, and tiny imperfections all come together in this small copper disc, making it a coin that continues to captivate, surprise, and inspire. The story of the 1995 D penny is far from over, and who knows, maybe the next hidden gem is right in your pocket.